Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to the making of my horror short film, We're Not Safe Here. Through interviews with the cast and crew and behind the scenes footage, this documentary will take you through the entire filmmaking process and showcase all of the hard work that went into the making of We're Not Safe Here. After making Sweet Dreams, I was hungry to make another horror short film, and I knew that I wanted to step everything up from the previous film. I wanted to tell a deeper story with more engaging characters and a more clear narrative that the audience could follow. I'd always wanted to play with paranoia in my films, because paranoia to me is one of the best emotional gut reactions that an audience can get out of a horror film. That fear that you don't know what to trust and something seems familiar but you're just not quite sure. That type of fear was definitely a big focus when coming up with this film. Ironically, the actual direct inspiration and what sparked the whole idea in my brain was this random video I saw on a meme app. It was a video of these guys in a tent, and for some reason Leaves from the Vine was playing, that song from Avatar: The Last Airbender. But anyway, and one character, this guy just gets snatched out of the tent, and suddenly another guy comes in dressed in a gorilla costume, and he like enters the tent and he's just huge, and it's like, it's a weird combination, that video of like, okay, I guess that's funny, but also kind of weird. And a lot of the comments were just saying like, how scary would that be if you watched your friend get snatched out of a tent like that? And I thought, that is pretty scary. And believe it or not, that's the spark that actually led to the making of this film. Of course, I immediately started thinking of how these characters would end up in that situation, how one character would be snatched out of the tent, and of course that image of the monster entering, I wanted to incorporate that into my film. And then I had that whole idea of paranoia and a voice that you don't know what to trust, and that's where it led to creating this creature called La Mimica and the entire dangerous situation that ended up becoming the story of the film. So after figuring out my story and writing it into script form and making a ton of revisions and just working at it over and over again, I finally was happy with what I had. And so I set out with the pre-production stages of We're Not Safe Here. Pre-production was a lot of work with this film because I had several key features of the film that I knew needed to be really well done, and it would be all up to just what I could find, whether it was casting my actors for these important three bros that we needed to like and believe, then to the locations, specifically a location with a campfire. It would have to be external, and just gathering all of the resources. So a lot of this began when I reached out to my friend Keaton, who would be my creative producer and just a go-to guy for this film.
In pre-production, creative producers more going over the scripts, offering advice on acting performances of auditions, helping look at locations, sort of just helping all of that. Wherever Chris would need an extra set of eyes, I would help with that. The biggest problem by far was finding a location, because it had to look like it was out in the middle of nowhere, but not be in the middle of nowhere, and allow a campfire. So it was like tricky to find, but then we finally found an Airbnb that worked very well.
Once we had the locations picked out and the cast and crew beginning to assemble was when it came time for me to make the shot list for this film. And that is where then I would hand off my shot list to my director of photography, Jack, so he could figure out how are we actually going to shoot this thing.
First of all, he did a very detailed storyboard, which I appreciate, and we took that storyboard and ordered everything out by shot, like grouped everything together by setups. So we have a dolly let's do all the dolly shots for this portion, and then all the close-ups for this portion, and whatnot. We gathered up some references from other films, like we did on Sweet Dreams. We pulled from Invisible Man and A Quiet Place, Part 2, specifically, because there's a campfire scene in A Quiet Place, Part 2, that we referenced off of.
Casting was really important for this film because these three main characters had to be believable as longtime friends, and I wanted them to be really engaging and entertaining, but also realistic. And part of that came to the dialogue, which I wrote to be kind of just like overflowing and natural. But then, of course, a lot of that really just came down to the actors and their performances. So with casting, I needed to find three bros that would be believable believable as friends, and also each bro would be able to pull off each of the characters and their unique, distinct personalities, and specifically their headspaces involved in the film, because that was a big part of the story, as everyone has a different perspective of what's going on. There's a character who's very paranoid and scared the whole time, there's a character who doesn't take it seriously at all, and then there's the other character who kind of might be behind the whole thing, and you're just not quite sure about that. Once I had my cast assembled, the location was definitely the one that took the longest to find. It was really challenging to find an outdoors area in Southern California that would allow me to light a real campfire, and not a campfire like in a fire pit or anything, because these characters are supposed to have hiked far out into the middle of the woods. Why would they carry something like that with them? So I needed to be able to just make a campfire, and not many places in Southern California are very comfortable with that, which is, of course, not surprising to anyone who lives here. But I eventually found an Airbnb that was usually used for renting out wedding reception places. That was usually where people shot there, or they would do like photography stuff. But a nighttime horror movie shoot was new for them. But luckily, they were really nice and allowed me to use their location and be able to light a real campfire, which ended up being an amazing payoff for me, because I was close to giving up on thinking I would actually get this campfire to work. But I was really happy to finally get that location and to be confident, like, oh, okay, we got it. All right, this is gonna work. Now, going along with dialogue being very important in this film and a lot of it being overlapping, overall I knew that I needed to have good sound, because with Sweet Dreams we didn't really do a whole lot of sound. We had Spencer doing sound, but he didn't really have a whole lot of equipment. He just kind of had like a basic setup, and in the end I just ended up using Foley for the entire film. But this time around, sound was really important, which is why Spencer suggested a friend of his, Ethan, to take over, and I am very glad that he did.
On the very early stage of the pre-production, I did my usual like breakdown. I know how much lines each character have, and how much of an overlapping we got, and just at least a basic overview of the story, because sometimes you need some expendables for specific shoots.
Now, of course, we can't forget there was one final character that I had to cast, and that was La Mimica, which was a very different casting process, because there were no lines of dialogue. Instead, I needed to find an actor who was lanky and skinny and able to contort their body and was super comfortable just like being in heavy prosthetics and makeup and playing this wacky creature. And luckily, I found Carson.
I got interested because I do a lot of creature acting, or I try to, and I'm really interested in things that feel very different.
With pre-production out of the way is where we move on to the production stages, and specifically to day one. Day one of the shoot was immediately challenging, because when I woke up, I had a text from Keaton that said, it's supposed to rain tonight.
The only big problem was the day of the first day of filming, we found out that it was going to start raining while filming. So that pretty much ruined everything, because it's an outdoor set that needs to look like a campfire and everything, but it was raining.
We were definitely concerned, but we just made sure to have enough trash bags to cover up all the gear and umbrellas and stuff.
So right away, I got ADR of all of the actors, which was really nice, because it kind of just served as a rehearsal. Just all the three actors standing around a microphone, just saying all of their lines, just going through the whole scene. And that was really handy to then have in post-production, just in case if any shots were too rained on.
So to meet the boys, and then just to get to jump right into reading the script together, almost as a little mock rehearsal, was so fun, because I loved getting to run it with these other people. I've been so focused on trying to memorize, I think that monologue is like 2 or 3 pages. And we weren't even just doing it for rehearsal. We were doing it for ADR, which was just a blast. And I feel like when we were first doing those run-throughs for Ethan and recording it, there was an element of like, oh yeah, this is take one kind of a thing.
As the shooting went underway, it was running pretty smooth. The location looked beautiful. It was kind of spooky, because we would hear like weird animal noises every now and then.
Yeah, there were always moments where we would hear like a really weird animal or something like that in the distance, or like just like hear like a weird noise or something like that, or see a weird light, and it would just be like it would be this weird, like, what was that? That's weird.
And for the meantime, it was not raining yet. We were able to get nice, clean shots. We were moving through the scene. The campfire was difficult.
We had to have a practical fire on set. Everyone was super busy and really into what they were doing, and so I used my downtime to kind of tend to the fire, because I like doing that. And I, from a previous film, learned how to make a fire and learned how to properly tend to it, so felt pretty good about that.
Nick was making me laugh a lot on set. He very much embodies a lot of the similar traits of Ian's character, but of course minus the creepy, weird side. But he's just like a funny guy, and there was this one part where he's given the speech, and he kept like messing up this one line. It kept hanging him up, and just like some of the way he would react to it, we have a couple really funny bloopers of him messing up.
So rumor has it, the natives would hear strange noises in the forest. What? Oh my God.
That was perfect. Sorry guys, I looked right into the camera.
Yes, that was perfect.
I did it again. I keep looking right at the camera. Sorry guys.
But then lo and behold, it did start sprinkling a bit.
There was a little bit of a light drizzle, especially towards the end. It kind of became a little bit more than a light drizzle. And that was definitely challenging because we were in a lot of dirt and it, kind of molded into mud and our equipment got a little dirty.
By that point, we had the majority of everything shot, and it was all non-dialogue stuff, and everything else we managed pretty nicely.
But luckily, there was only one shot, I think, in the whole film that during the editing process, I actually could hear the rain, and that was just the one shot of Henry sitting alone, and he asks whatever happened to him. But adding in the campfire noises right there, it blends right in. You can't even tell that there's rain noises. It already kind of sounded like the crackling of the fire. So day one was pretty much night one. It was definitely a later shoot. It didn't go as late as Sweet Dreams, of course, which went till like 4 a.m. This one, I think, ended around like 1 a.m. or 1:30, something like that. But of course, the next day would be day two of the shoot, which would take place entirely in a studio. Day two is kind of the opposite of day one, at least when it started out.
The second day was a breath of fresh air from the first day, because since we planned to only shoot the interior of the tent for the second day, we shot at a soundstage for the second day.
We knew we weren't going to have to deal with any external issues visually and like camera wise. We were like, okay, great. We're completely in control of the stage that we were shooting on. And equipment that we did have was totally suitable for what we needed.
And we didn't have any sort of surprise hiccup where the schedule had to be rewritten. However, I did end up having to rewrite the schedule as we were moving along, which I already did in day one, but then day two, stuff was happening. Just certain shots were taking a little longer than expected, and so I just had to kind of rewrite stuff. And that was a new exciting thing actually with this shoot, because with Sweet Dreams, I was able to accomplish pretty much everything I wanted. I didn't really have to cut anything out. But with We're Not Safe Here, both days, I had to rewrite some stuff and combine certain shots or sacrifice another shot or whatever, and it was active. It was definitely like, okay, I just have to adapt to these circumstances, just get what I can while we're all here. What started in the pre-production stages was smart because I had a plan with the way that we would shoot these 3 different tents. If you're shooting in the tent, you need it to be a giant tent, so that way you can fit the camera in and you can have other people in there, and just on camera, interior locations end up looking smaller than they actually are in real life.
The actual tent itself was tricky to shoot in because it was tiny, so it was tough to kind of fit everyone in, and it would get hot in the tent and stuff like that.
We couldn't get a certain camera angle in the tent, so we actually got a knife and cut a hole into it to like get a certain like angle of the shot.
So for the shooting tent for day 2, I bought a 6-person tent from Amazon, and luckily that exact same tent had a 4-person variant that then was used for day 1, where it's just the exterior, so you get an idea of like, okay, that's their tent that they're staying in. And I don't think anyone in the audience would have ever realized that it was actually 2 different tents. But then of course the other surprise is that I also used a 2-person tent. Again, the same brand, it was the same tent basically, just smaller versions, which was really lucky. But yeah, we took that 2-person tent and we used that for the final shot of the film where La Mimica enters the tent and is meant to be larger than life. And since the audience doesn't realize that the tent has been switched out, instead it still kind of looks like the same tent we've been looking at, which was the 6-person tent. But then once this person enters, this person seems larger than life because in reality it was a smaller tent. So little trick like that.
Oh, and shaking the tent was fun. Shaking the tent was Spencer and I. That was both of us on the outside of the tent, so pretty much Chris would signal to us and we would just shake the tent a lot, and then we would just like look at each other and like time it for when we ended the shake at like the same time.
And we eventually got so good to the point where like we eventually were just stopping at like the exact same time, and it looked really, really nice on camera.
Then it was funny because for Bobby's screaming death noises, I just told him, scream, you know, you're dying, you're getting ripped apart, you're screaming, and you just slowly die. And we just kind of took him into the bathroom that came with that studio, and in that tiny little enclosed area, he just screamed his heart out, which apparently was really fun for him.
Being Matt, from my perspective, yes, at some points it gets freaky, but, you know, I'm still there to have a good time. So there's not that deathly terror inside me. I didn't have to do that, which is great. And then, you know, I get killed. So making all the death sounds and everything was kind of just the theory of, if you do it right, you only got to do it once. So might as well just do it as well as I can. And we went into a bathroom and put a, you know, a moving mat over me so it didn't echo. And then it was just die for 30 seconds. Didn't feel stupid at all. Die the most gruesome, horrible death you can. Great, you get applauded for it. So that was fun, man. That was a good time.
Henry had the difficult job of playing the character who's being gaslit the whole film. I jokingly like to refer to this film as gaslighting the film because that's what's happening to poor Alex throughout the whole thing. And especially once he witnesses his friend get snatched out of the tent and he believes that his friend was just ripped apart, he is freaking out. Like, he is full on having a mental breakdown.
Being given permission from myself to genuinely do the best I could to put myself in this character's shoes, unabashedly, as nakedly as possible. I think it's when I close up the tent, when I'm fiddling with it, when I like back away from it, I forgot which part exactly, but I'm crouched there in the tent and I'm a little bit hyperventilating, not too much, so I don't pass out, but I'm like, you know, sort of putting myself in that breath space, and I'm smiling and I'm telling myself, just play, just have a good time, like just play, just see what happens. No matter what kind of material I'm working with, whether it's like totally off the walls, comedic and wacky, or if it's you need to have a breakdown any moment now. If I can start with that mentality of just play, I'm setting myself up for not even thinking about it. I'm not thinking about the scene too much. I'm not thinking about where the camera is. I'm not thinking about how do I look right now. I'm just in the circumstance of whatever the script is asking.
And then the final shot of the film, which ended up being the final shot that we got, was the La Mimica shot. And La Mimica, I was surprised to find out Carson didn't eat at all before sitting in the makeup chair. And he was in that makeup chair for 6 hours.
I did want to try to accentuate my very thin skeleton-like frame for the character when I could. If it was going to show up, whether I didn't know if it was going to or not. And I didn't want a sandwich to be able to be seen through it. I want to make sure you can see the full rib cage and everything, because I mean that's part of why I get these kind of roles and why I do this kind of stuff, is because I look the part and I want to make sure that I could do it as much justice as possible.
Getting him to put on the bald cap and adding the veins all over him and pretty much just turning him into the actual creature was really long, but it turned out pretty good. Like, everything was coming out smooth and flawless, applying everything on.
But there was a funny hiccup during the makeup process where the fake teeth weren't molding to Carson's mouth because we didn't have hot boiling water to use.
So yeah, we needed hot water and we didn't have it at the locations.
We didn't have a microwave or anything, so we were kind of desperate, and so we just ended up having to go to 7-Eleven to get hot water, and like Carson wanted to come in, and like the cashiers,
like, they didn't even want to make eye contact.
Yeah, they were like super freaked out.
We just went straight to the hot water, got a cup, and we dipped.
I was halfway in the car and we were just stuffing the teeth in. It was definitely fun, having that adventure element to it. It's a great story. It's really fun.
But in the end, it worked out. We got the teeth in the mouth, and it was creepy looking.
Chris was never super happy with the final shot. While we were shooting it, we did 11 different takes because it was such an important shot that it has to be perfect. So there would just be little things of like, oh, like raise your arm a little bit. Oh, like don't open your mouth as much. Open your mouth more. Tilt your head this way. So like, you know, it was such a quick shot where all he had to do was walk in. La Mimica had to walk in and like, you know, screech. But we ended up doing that like 11 or 12 times because we just wanted to get it perfect each time.
So with day 2 wrapped, it then came time for the post-production process. Editing this film in some ways was pretty smooth. A lot of the shots that I had planned out were easily picked out. You know, it wasn't like, oh, this shot didn't work out, so now I have to make something up completely. There weren't too many times I had to do that. The biggest thing actually during editing was the dialogue, because Ethan did an amazing job of miking up all the actors and giving me a lot of different layers of sound to work with each take.
You want, audio to be on separate tracks. You want probably want to do editing on the dialogue. That's the first thing. And sometimes you want to do certain mixing adjustment, like effect on each of the characters. But once they're overlapping, you can just have to deal with whatever you have when they're overlapping.
And during post-production was when it came time to do something brand new that I had never done in a film, and that was have an original score.
It was fun because I've been doing music for most of my life, and this is a pretty basic soundtrack that's only like guitar and a few instruments for like most of it, just kind of layering different instruments on top of each other. And it was a lot of fun kind of doing that and experimenting with it and kind of like building the sound. That was a lot of fun.
I loved the music immediately. It absolutely just gave an identity to this film that I hadn't previously expected. It just made it feel a lot more professional and legit because it was original music. And it also just added a ton to the film.
I used Cakewalk to record the instruments. It's just like a free PC version of GarageBand almost. Like it's just pretty free and basic. But I just recorded that guitar on this mic for most of it, for like the melody and stuff like that. I would like screech on the strings and stuff for some of the weirder sounds. And then I have just like a $30 keyboard from Amazon that I plugged into my laptop and did a bunch of different sounds, like a didgeridoo is in it. There's some piano stuff, some of the bass stuff, some of the strings, like all of that is pretty much from the keyboard and just like free plugins I found.
With Sweet Dreams, I on purpose did no music. So then this time around, I was like, okay, if there's going to be music, it's going to be important. It's going to be part of the story. And that's where the entire beginning of the film featuring the Matt character playing the guitar then blends in. So that way we're immediately introduced to a real instrument that's there, that ends up being a plot point, and that carries through with the flowing of the music. Keaton did a really cool thing with the music where after Matt is snatched out of the tent and then Alex is now talking to Ian and Matt outside the tent, he's freaking out, he doesn't know what to trust. We hear the main theme playing, which is cool because that main theme kind of sounds like soothing and like, ooh, kind of like catchy and like, oh, this is nice, this is relaxing.
In the solo of the Tenacious D song, Dude, I Totally Miss You, in the acoustic guitar solo of that, it's like the most random thing, but I really like that solo. And the guitarist does like a chord thing in the solo, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And I kind of just changed that and like made it a little lower, and that was like the opening like 3 notes of the guitar chord, and then the rest of it kind of just like organically blossomed from that.
So that theme immediately kind of gives us this feeling of relaxation and trust, which is exactly what the voices outside want Alex to feel. But Alex doesn't know what to trust, and he still thinks that it's the creature. So the fact that trusting music is being played underneath him freaking out and trying to understand things, it just like creates that perfect balance of just like clashing in tone and paranoia that I was really going for in the film. We did have one hiccup with the music, and that was the opening shot.
I'm the one playing the guitar for the first shot of the film. You just can't tell. But we shot that on day 1 before we had any of the music or anything like that. So then when we were doing the music, it didn't match or anything. So we went to just like this random park at night and just reshot that one scene, but you can't tell.
After all of the main editing had been done for the film was then when I dove into making the poster and the thumbnail, which is always super duper important just to get attention to your film, especially on YouTube. And originally my thumbnail idea was the poster, 3 guys sitting around the campfire, but in thumbnail form it just didn't work as well. It just didn't capture my attention, and faces capture attention, and Nick's face when he's giving that creepy speech worked perfectly. So I just took his face, I kind of manipulated certain features, exaggerated other bits, and added in that beautiful text and made it all fiery and stuff, and it worked out nicely. I was really happy with that thumbnail.
I love being the thumbnail, and if I had any sense, I would have had it in my contract that that's how it should be. I had someone who's known me very well for a very long time said, "Is that you? You look scary."
And then the film was released on Friday the 13th, and my audience reacted very positively to this film in a way that I had never seen before. A lot of the comments kept using terminology like, okay, this one was actually really good, which implied that I had always been like good, like they liked my films, but this one actually impressed them. This one was a step up in every way, which was amazing because that's exactly what I was going for with this film. I wanted to step everything up from Sweet Dreams.
I was really pleased right off the bat with how it was edited. Even in the trailer, I was like, they nailed the beats with the editing. Because the storytelling is done right there in that room, no matter what lighting, sound, or the actors do in the moment.
I loved watching it. It came together really fast, so I was excited about that. So when I got the link to watch it, I threw it on. And I mean, right from the first shots, you can tell, okay, this is at the very least going to be well made.
I loved it. I love the tension. I think there was a really good chemistry between the guys, and I really enjoyed it, and I was really happy to be a part of it.
I really like how it turned out. I think a lot of the different components of the short film work well together, like the cinematography and the music and the acting, like it all kind of like meshes really well. And I think the music really like boosts it. It kind of elevates it to be like almost this like ultra professional short film, because your brain just like hears custom music that like fits through it, and it kind of just like attaches that to like other mainstream horror short films or like movies that you've seen.
It's definitely cool seeing it, because like watching it even before it came out, I was getting scared from the jump scares that I was a part of. So
I was actually really immersed into the short film, so I was getting a little scared. I had the general audience reaction. I didn't know how it was going to turn out, and then when I actually saw him, I was like, whoa, that looks pretty scary. But it felt good to see all the work turn out, and I love that it was at the end as well, so that it was the last thing that they saw.
All came together, and when you finally saw the creature, it just did look pretty scary.
My overall takeaways, We're Not Safe Here was definitely a more challenging production than Sweet Dreams, and I already knew it was going to be challenging. Originally, I'd set out to try and make a film that wasn't super more difficult than Sweet Dreams, but then it ended up becoming a 2-day shoot very quickly, which just made it twice as difficult automatically. But you have multiple characters, you have fire, you have lots of dialogue, and one lesson that surprised me after making this film was blocking. Blocking was very important and something that I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to beforehand, and that proved to make the shoot more difficult, because when you have moving shots and characters going to certain places, it all has to be planned out how this character will move here, what they will be grabbing, the overall area, and how the camera will be following the action. And when you don't really plan that out beforehand, and it's just like, okay, you're gonna do this and go, it's sort of like, okay, wait, but how? And that was something that I didn't really think about beforehand. That is definitely a good lesson for me to learn from now on, is blocking, very important. But overall, I was really happy with the completion of this film. I think it turned out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to. I was really happy with the music and how it just gave this film this legit production value and personal identity that made it just special. I really like how that flowed in. I also really love the shots. I think there's some really nice, beautiful shots, especially with the campfire and even that one shot where Matt is pushing his hand up against the tent and he has his flashlight. There's just definitely a lot more shots in this film that I think are more beautiful looking. The only thing I would change about the film is the ending shot didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. I think it had something to do with that optical illusion of this is supposed to be a giant creature entering the tent. Didn't quite make it on screen. It had something to do with just the shot, the size of the tent, maybe sound effects, the movement, just something about that shot didn't quite come together exactly how I wanted to, which of course is a shame because it is the ending jump scare of the film, but I still think it works semi-well and it does startle people, and everything before it is still great, and a lot of the key jump scary moments that I had planned in the film still work out really nicely. This film was definitely a big challenge to make. It was a bigger production than Sweet Dreams. Everything was stepped up in every way, and I think the finished product really reflects that. This pursuit of making a more challenging film that accomplishes a lot more, and I'm really happy with the finished product, and I'm very happy with the audience reaction. And I think everyone involved in the production, this film definitely would not have ended up as great as it was without all of your talent and passion. With We're Not Safe Here complete, I'm very excited to continue exploring horror and telling even more deeper stories and exploring different aspects of horror and fear. And I'm very excited for my next film, which is currently in pre-production. I think it is going to be a step up in every way. It's going to continue the trend of me exploring more, getting bigger, better with each film. And I'm very excited to see the audience reaction to that film.